She can die in a shelter for all I care. That's what I heard before I even reached the top step. My daughter-in-law's voice, sharp as broken glass, carrying through the hallway I'd walked for 35 years. I stood there with 2 grocery bags in my arms, the evening air still cold on my cheeks, wondering how a human heart could produce a tone so cruel and so casual at the same time. When I tried my key, it didn't fit. It didn't even resist. It simply slid in and turned loose, as if the lock no longer recognized me. A stranger, a nobody, someone whose hands had once pulled those very doors open 1,000 times without thinking. Before I could knock, the door swung inward. And there she was. Melanie, my son's wife. 34, pretty in a sharp surgical way. Expensive hair, expensive nails, expensive contempt. She blocked the doorway with her arm. "Your key won't work anymore," she said. "We changed the locks this afternoon." I said nothing. At 79, silence has become my armor. Thin, but still mine. I looked past her instinctively, toward the living room where my husband's armchair once stood, where my son learned to walk, where I spent more than half my life making sure everyone else was fed and warm. But the armchair was gone. The photographs erased from the walls. 2 boxes stood near the trash chute. My boxes. I recognized the old quilt sticking out from the top, the one my mother stitched by hand when I was 19. "Melanie," I said quietly, "what is this?" She smiled like a cat that just swallowed something small and soft. "This," she said, "is the point where your life stops being our responsibility. This building belongs to us now. We're not keeping a spare unit for an old woman who refuses to move on." My fingers tightened on the grocery bags until the plastic cut into my skin. "This building belongs to me," I said, still calm, still steady. "Every unit, every inch of it. You both know that." She laughed. "Oh, please. Harold told me everything. You're confused. Documents can be changed. Ownership can be transferred. Families evolve." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "But nursing homes don't need much space. And shelters? Even less. You should be grateful we're giving you this much time." I felt the words enter my chest one by one, like cold needles. I didn't cry. I refused. I just stood there, every part of me aware of the weight of the years behind me. Everything I had built, everything I had held together when my husband died and I kept the building running alone, everything I had paid for and protected. "Where's Harold?" I asked. She shrugged. "Busy. And don't bother waiting. We're starting our life here as a family. You're not part of that." She began closing the door. For a moment, I thought she'd stop, that she'd hear the blood pounding in my ears, the quiet dignity I was trying so hard to hold on to. But the door kept moving, slowly, firmly, until the latch clicked, and I was left staring at the painted wood where my son should have stood. I don't know how long I stood there. The hallway lights flickered. The building is old, the wiring older, and I always meant to replace that fixture myself. My knees ached from the groceries. My breath came out in small white clouds, though I wasn't sure if it was the cold or the shock. When I finally moved, I didn't go back to the door. I went to the trash chute. I opened the first box. Inside were my shoes, my winter scarf, my late husband's fountain pen, a framed photograph of Harold at 5 years old, smiling with all his baby teeth missing. They had thrown my life out like clutter. I carried the boxes down the back stairs, one step at a time, my hands trembling but steady enough. I loaded everything into my old Buick. I had no plan, just movement, just breath, just survival. By the time I reached the driver's seat, the sky had turned dark. I closed the door, sat there quietly, and listened to the engine ticking in the cold. It was only then, only in that sealed loneliness, that I let myself exhale. And in that long, slow breath, something inside me settled, not broken, not defeated, just sharpened. Because if they thought they could take my home from me, they had forgotten who built it. I spent most of the night sitting in my Buick, watching the building breathe in the dark. 4 stories, 14 units, red brick fading to rust along the edges. People think buildings sleep at night, but they don't. They hum. Pipes settle. Radiators sigh. Footsteps echo through old hallways. I'd memorized every one of those sounds long before my hair turned white. I didn't start the engine, didn't turn on the heat. The cold crept into my bones, but I let it. Better to feel something honest than the numbness that had taken over earlier. A streetlight flickered above me. I made a mental note. Replace the bulb. Tighten the fixture. I'd already paid for that repair last Tuesday, but the electrician hadn't come yet. I'd need to call him again, though I wasn't sure what number I'd give for billing now. My mind moved through small, practical thoughts the way tired hands fold laundry, quietly, methodically, just to stay steady. It's strange, the things your mind clings to when your world suddenly tilts. Not the betrayal, not the humiliation, but the little tasks that remind you you're still tethered to something. Around midnight, the upstairs tenant, Mrs. Klein with the noisy slippers, crossed her living room. I could hear the soft drag of her feet even from outside. That sound used to irritate me. Tonight, it grounded me. These were my tenants, my building, my responsibility, my life. But as the hours passed, my body reminded me that 79 is not built for sitting in a car through the night. My knees throbbed. My fingers stiffened. When I tried to tighten my coat, I realized I hadn't zipped it properly at all, just clutched it in disbelief earlier and never fastened it. I should have gone somewhere, a motel, a friend's couch. But pride is a quiet chain, and dignity is another. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. Displaced, stunned, bags of groceries squashed in the back seat. My whole life reduced to 2 cardboard boxes. Around 2 in the morning, I found a blanket in the trunk, the old wool one my husband used when he drove night shifts. I wrapped it around my shoulders and leaned my head back. I didn't close my eyes. I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I let my thoughts walk. Slow, tired steps through the long hallway of the years since Harold grew up. I didn't drift into memories. I stayed in the present, letting the cold and the dark scrape the truth clean. My son hadn't opened the door. Not once. Not even when he heard my voice. He used to run to me when he got hurt as a boy, clutching my hand, hiding his face in my apron. Tonight he'd hidden behind a woman who looked at me like an old stain on the carpet she was planning to replace. The sky shifted from black to navy, the first suggestion of dawn. My breath misted the inside of the windshield. The building looked different in that pale blue light. Tired, worn, but familiar. Mine. And that's when the first thread of resolve pulled taut inside me. They had thrown out my shoes, my scarf, my photographs. Yes. But they had forgotten something important. Paperwork can be forged. Locks can be changed. But property records, trusts, legal titles, Those sit in safe boxes and digital vaults far beyond the reach of a greedy young woman with a manicure and a plan. Dignity wasn't going to save me. Documentation would. My hands were stiff when I finally started the car. The engine coughed, then steadied. Sunlight edged over the rooftops as I pulled away from the curb. I watched the building shrink in the rearview mirror, not in sorrow, but in determination. If I stayed in that parking spot any longer, I would break. If I moved, I would fight. And I have always been better at fighting quietly than falling loudly. I turned toward downtown. The bank would open at 8, and I planned to be waiting at the door. The bank opened at 8. I was there at 7:40, sitting on the frozen bench outside the glass doors with my purse pressed against my knees and the blanket still draped over my shoulders. People passing by probably thought I was just another old woman waiting for the bus. Good. Let them. There's power in being underestimated. When the young teller unlocked the door, she startled at the sight of me. "Good morning, ma'am. We're not open yet." "I'm here to see Mr. Wells," I said. "Tell him Margaret Harlow is waiting." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't either. Cold can be useful that way. It freezes the fear before it reaches the surface. She hesitated, then nodded and let me in. The warmth of the lobby hit me like an unexpected kindness. Soft carpet, humming vents, coffee brewing somewhere behind the counters. It smelled like order, stability, things that don't disappear overnight because someone decides you're inconvenient. I sat down carefully, smoothing my skirt, adjusting my coat. I hadn't slept, but I'd tied my hair back before leaving the car, and that simple act gave me a sense of structure. Women my age know how to build dignity from scraps. After a few minutes, the office door opened and a man stepped out. Mid-60s, silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of handshake that used to reassure me when the world felt too fast. "Margaret," he said, surprised. "You're here early." "I need to update my account settings," I replied. "All of them." His eyebrows rose at the emphasis, but he gestured me inside without a word. I followed him, every step deliberate, every breath steady. Inside his office, the blinds were half open, the morning sun making thin stripes across the desk. He sat. I remained standing. "Before I sit down," I said, "I need to be sure of one thing." "Yes?" "Every transfer authorization tied to my son, Harold Harlow, every access code, cosigner privilege, account view, recurring payment he manages, all of it can be revoked immediately, correct?" His expression shifted. Not judgment, not surprise, but something closer to concern. "Yes," he said slowly, "but that's a significant change." "May I ask?" "No," I said. "You may not." He nodded, respectfully. I finally sat. For the next hour, we worked through every document. I knew the accounts better than most people would at my age. I wasn't confused, I wasn't frail, and I wasn't going to let a single loophole remain open. We canceled automatic transfers my son had set up years ago, payments he was supposed to manage for my convenience. We removed him from every digital access list. We closed the secondary card I once gave him for emergencies that never seemed to end. We froze the account he'd used as if it were his own. The building's operating fund remained intact, under my sole authority. When Mr. Wells handed me the final folder to sign, he exhaled softly. "You've protected yourself well over the years," he said. "Your husband set things up wisely." "No," I said. "I set them up wisely, after he died." He looked at me a moment longer, and I could tell he saw it. The steel beneath the thin skin of age. When everything was done, he leaned back. "There is one more thing, Margaret," If you want to fully secure the property, I can contact your attorney. We can place a temporary legal freeze on any unauthorized transfer requests, just in case. Do it, I said. He nodded and picked up the phone. While he dialed, I looked out the window. The city was waking up. Bus engines rumbling, bicycles clattering, the world moving forward, one ordinary minute at a time. Last night, I'd been thrown out of my own home. This morning, I was reclaiming my life one signature at a time. When the call was finished and the document sealed, I stood. Thank you, I said. Margaret, he replied gently. Are you all right? I thought about answering, explaining, crying even. But I had used up all my softness the night before. I'm getting there, I said instead, and that will be enough. As I stepped back into the cold morning air, the blanket tight around my shoulders, I felt something return to me, slowly, firmly, like a bone setting after being broken. Control. Quiet. Familiar. Overdue control. And I was not done yet. By the time I left the bank, the sun was fully up. A weak winter sunlight, the kind that looks warm but isn't. The kind that makes old brick buildings glow softly, even when the cold bites at your fingers. I tightened the blanket around my shoulders and walked toward the property management office 2 blocks away. I've known that office longer than I've known most people. When my husband passed, I took over everything myself: contracts, inspections, rent rolls. But as the years crept into my bones, I hired a manager I trusted, Dwight Kramer. Soft-spoken, middle-aged, serious about receipts, allergic to drama. Exactly the kind of man who understands paperwork better than emotions. When I pushed open the door, he looked up from his computer, startled. Mrs. Harlow, are you all right? You look cold, I said, and I need your help. He stood immediately, concern flickering across his face. What happened? I placed my purse on the edge of his desk and remained standing. I need the master access codes changed today, I said. Every digital lock, every tenant entry point, the basement storage, the boiler room, and especially Unit 1B. He blinked. Unit 1B, that's yours? Yes. My voice stayed calm, almost too calm. It was mine yesterday as well. He didn't ask questions. Dwight never asked questions. That's why I hired him. Instead, he pulled up the building dashboard on his computer. We can change all codes within an hour, he said. But, Mrs. Harlow, legally, we need to confirm you're still the primary owner on record. Check, I said. He opened the property registry file. I watched the screen reflect in his glasses as his eyes moved down the document. Owner, Margaret Eleanor Harlow. Sole proprietor. No co-owners, no transferees, no pending claims. His shoulders loosened with relief. Everything is intact, he said. Do you want to restrict access to the Harlows entirely? Yes. And Melanie? Especially Melanie. He nodded slowly, typing commands with the precision of a surgeon. Done. The system chimed, a soft electronic note, like something locking into place. I felt my spine straighten, the way it used to when I carried books stacked high during my college library job. A quiet, natural dignity that had fallen dormant these last years. Dwight continued, still working. Should I notify tenants that access codes are being updated? No, not yet. I'll speak with them myself. His fingers paused above the keyboard. He finally asked very gently, Are you planning an eviction, Mrs. Harlow? I looked at him, not sharply, just steadily enough that he understood the gravity. I am planning clarity, I said. Legal clarity. He exhaled. Then we need to prepare the paperwork. Unauthorized occupancy, refusal to vacate, modification of property without owner's consent. You have grounds. Yes, I know. He opened a new document and rotated the monitor slightly so I could see. Before I file anything, he said, you'll need to sign here, confirming you did not grant them permission to change your locks. I picked up his pen. My hand didn't tremble. Age gives you many things: fragile bones, stiff knees, slower mornings. But it also gives you hands that know how to sign a line without apologizing for being on the right side of it. As my signature dried, Dwight cleared his throat. There's one more matter. He turned his monitor back. Your rent disbursement accounts. Your son manages those. Not anymore, I said. Everything has been resecured. He nodded, slow, respectful. Then it's done. By noon, your building will be locked down. No one unauthorized will be able to enter. Thank you, Dwight. He hesitated again. Do you need a place to stay tonight? I can call a friend. No, I'll manage. I lifted my purse, straightened my coat. As I reached the door, he spoke once more. Mrs. Harlow? Yes? You're doing the right thing. I gave him the smallest nod. I'm doing the only thing left. The cold hit me again when I stepped outside. But it felt different this time. Sharper, cleaner. Like the kind of cold that wakes you up after years of being numb. The building loomed down the street, solemn and familiar. 13 tenants would open their doors tonight and walk through hallways I had kept safe for decades. One apartment, my apartment, would remain locked, waiting for me to reclaim it. And Melanie, well, the next morning, she would discover the world she thought she owned had never belonged to her at all. By the time I reached the building again, the day had thawed just enough for the ice along the gutters to start dripping. Small sounds, steady, familiar. The kind of sounds a building makes when it's aging with dignity, not rotting under someone else's ambition. I walked slowly, the blanket still around my shoulders, though now it felt more like armor than refuge. Tenants were already moving in and out, morning routines unfolding as if nothing strange had happened in apartment 1B. But people notice things, especially in old buildings where everyone hears everything. The first to spot me was Mr. Hollander from 2A, retired postal worker, widower, the kind of man who remembers birthdays without ever writing them down. He paused on the stairwell landing, holding a bag of oranges. Mrs. Harlow? He asked gently. You're out early. Everything all right? His kindness almost undid me. Kindness always hits harder than cruelty. I forced a small smile. Just taking care of some things. He studied my face longer than I liked. Then he shifted the oranges into one hand and reached into his pocket with the other. If you need anything at all, you knock on my door. I don't sleep much these days. I nodded. Thank you, Robert. As he walked past, he patted my shoulder with an awkward, warm hand. A simple gesture, but it made me feel less like a ghost. On the ground floor, I ran into young Jessie from 3C, lugging a laundry basket almost as big as she was. 21, studying nursing, living paycheck to paycheck, always waving at me from the hallway like I mattered to her day. Mrs. H, she gasped. Oh my God, you were gone last night. I knocked, but no one answered. Are you okay? Her concern was loud, bright, youthful. I'm fine, Jessie, really. She frowned. Your door was weird, like someone messed with the lock. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Young ears notice things, and young hearts usually leap to the truth faster than older ones. I made muffins, she added suddenly. Blueberry. They're probably awful, but you can have the first batch for free, for quality control. That made me smile for real. I'll come by later. She blushed, as if giving me muffins was something monumental. I continued down the hallway, each step slow, steady. Not because of my age, but because I was taking in every detail. The peeling paint near the mailboxes I meant to repaint in spring. The picture frame one tenant hung crooked and never fixed. The smell of onion soup from 2D drifting into the air. This was my building. Not perfect, not grand, but mine. Near the end of the hallway, the superintendent, Lyle, emerged from the boiler room, wiping grease from his hands. He was a big man, tall and broad, the kind who terrified repairmen but doted on the neighborhood cats like they were royalty. "Mrs. Harlow," he said, straightening immediately. "Dwight told me to expect you. I changed the basement access codes already. New ones are in my pocket." "Good," I said. "Thank you." He hesitated, then dropped his voice. "Your daughter-in-law. She tried to come down here late last night, said she needed to check something about the heating. Didn't look right to me." "Of course she did. The boiler room is where the utility grid connects, the easiest place to tamper if one is planning to take over a property." "What did you do?" I asked. "I shut the door behind me and told her tenants aren't allowed in the mechanical rooms. She didn't like that." No, she wouldn't. Melanie expected obedience the way other people expect common courtesy. "Good work," I said softly. He nodded, almost proud. "If you need a place to rest," he added, "my wife wouldn't mind you sitting in our kitchen for a while. She's baking today. You know how she gets when she bakes. Whole house smells like cinnamon." I felt warmth spread in my chest, unexpected, undeserved, but deeply welcome. "Thank her for me," I said, "but I need to check something first." I walked past him toward my unit, though I didn't try to open the door. Not yet. The new code wasn't active until noon, and until then, I wanted nothing to do with the space that had been violated. Instead, I turned and walked back toward the courtyard entrance. The cold air stung my cheeks, clearing my thoughts. Melanie believed she had isolated me, pushed me out, made me powerless. But what she failed to understand was this simple truth. Women my age survive not because we are protected, but because we learned decades ago how to protect ourselves. And I was no one's discarded burden, not anymore. By noon, the air had turned crisp and bright, the kind of cold that sharpens everything it touches. I waited in the courtyard, watching the shadows shorten, listening to the familiar heartbeat of the building, the slam of a door on the second floor, a kettle whistling in 2C, the low murmur of someone on a morning phone call. Then the moment arrived. A sharp, metallic beep echoed faintly from somewhere inside. Dwight must have activated the new access system. I could almost feel the shift in the atmosphere, subtle, but real. A building recognizes its owner, the way an old dog recognizes its master. And this one had finally been returned to me. I didn't need to check my own door. I wasn't ready. Instead, I stayed in the courtyard and waited, because I knew what was coming. Melanie was never late to anything that benefited her. At 12:17, she strode into the courtyard wearing a beige coat, cinched tight at the waist, her hair precisely curled, her expression already irritated. She must have tried the old code once inside and failed. She was tapping fiercely on her phone, muttering under her breath. I watched from the iron bench near the shrubs, half hidden by a leafless hydrangea. She didn't see me. She marched up to the main entrance, punched in the old code, and tugged on the handle. Nothing. She froze, tried again. Still nothing. Her eyebrows shot up, sharp and angry. She jabbed at the keypad a third time, harder, as if she could bully electronics into obedience. When the lock refused her again, she slapped the metal plate with her palm. Her voice snapped through the courtyard. "Oh, for God's sake! Who changed this?" She pulled out her phone and dialed someone. The sound carried, thin and metallic, in the cold air. "Harold? The building won't let me in. Did you change something? Your mother's stupid codes aren't working. I swear, if she—" I stood then, slowly, deliberately. Her head jerked toward me. She stared as if she'd seen a ghost. I didn't step closer. I didn't need to. Age gives you presence when words fail. "Good afternoon, Melanie," I said quietly. "The system was updated this morning." Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked down at the keypad, back at me, then at her phone. Her expression flickered between confusion and dawning fury. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Corrected an error," I said. "You were never authorized to access the building systems." "This is my home," she snapped. "No," I corrected gently. "This is my building. I allowed you to live here. That's not the same thing." She took a step forward, her heels clicking too loudly on the pavement. "You can't just lock us out. You can't—" "I can," I said. "And I have." Her mouth opened in outrage, but I continued before she could spit something poisonous. "You changed my locks without permission. You entered my unit without consent. You disposed of my personal belongings. All of that is illegal. You made choices. Now you're seeing their consequences." She looked stunned, not defeated. She wasn't that type, but suddenly aware she had miscalculated. "Harold is calling the locksmith," she said triumphantly, lifting her chin. "We'll get in." "You won't," I replied. "The exterior doors aren't keyed. They're coded. Only the management company can change those settings, and they follow my instructions, not yours." For a moment, she simply stared at me, something cold flickering in her eyes. Then she turned her face slightly away, the way a child does before throwing a tantrum. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "You're old. You don't understand the world anymore." "Perhaps," I said calmly, "but I understand property law." Behind us, the side gate swung open. Harold hurried across the courtyard, coat unzipped, hair tousled. He looked like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. Guilt can do that. "Mom," he said breathlessly, "what's going on? Why isn't our code—" "It's not your code anymore," I said. He blinked fast, confused, then looked at Melanie as if she might supply the missing logic. She didn't. I watched his expression change. First worry, then embarrassment, then something that looked like fear. Not fear of me. Fear of what he'd allowed. Before he could speak again, the building superintendent stepped outside, holding a white envelope. "For you, Mrs. Harlow," he said, handing it to me. "Signed by Dwight. The updates are complete." A legal document inside. Perfect timing. Melanie's eyes darted toward the envelope like a hungry dog spotting meat. "What is that?" she snapped. "Your first warning," I said softly. "And your last chance to leave on your own terms." She laughed, shrill, brittle. "You think you can evict us?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." A long, cold silence settled over the courtyard. The second step of their downfall had begun, and they felt it. I didn't go straight home after the confrontation in the courtyard. My hands were steady enough, my voice had held firm, but inside, I felt that familiar, dangerous tremor. The one that comes when you stand your ground after years of making yourself small. So instead of hiding, I went where decisions are strengthened, not questioned. To my attorney. The office was only a 15-minute walk, though the wind made it feel longer. At 79, cold air hits the joints like quiet accusations. But step by step, I made my way down Maple Avenue and pushed through the glass door of a small, warm law office that smelled faintly of paper and old carpet. A young receptionist looked up. "Good afternoon. May I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Elridge," I said. "Margaret Harlow?" Her expression changed immediately. Recognition, then respect. She didn't even ask if I had an appointment. "Of course, Mrs. Harlow, I'll let him know." Within a minute, he appeared at the door of his office, gray suit, tired eyes, a man who has spent half his life keeping foolish people from destroying their own futures. He'd helped my husband draft the first version of our trust more than 20 years ago, and he'd helped me revise it twice since. He extended his hand. "Margaret, come in." I sat. Slowly, carefully. He waited, not rushing me, not making assumptions. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I placed the envelope from Dwight on his desk. "They changed my locks, put my belongings in the trash, told me to die in a shelter. They claim the building is theirs now." He didn't react dramatically. Good attorneys never do. He simply opened the envelope, scanned the first page, and exhaled once. "Unauthorized entry, property interference, attempted dispossession." He looked up. "And you didn't sign a thing transferring any rights, correct?" "Correct." "Then they've backed themselves into a legal hole so deep they'll need a ladder to climb out." His calmness steadied something inside me. He pulled up a document template on his computer. "Margaret, we'll proceed carefully, quietly. No theatrics. That protects you better than shouting ever could." "I prefer quiet," I said. "I know," he replied, with the kind of soft smile you give someone who has already endured enough. He turned to the screen. "First, we'll file a notice of unauthorized occupancy. It formally states they entered your residence without consent. Second, we'll initiate a cease and desist order concerning harassment and interference with property. Third, we'll request a temporary injunction, preventing them from accessing any part of the building until the matter is resolved. And fourth," he slid his glasses lower, looking at me directly, "we prepare for eviction." I didn't flinch. "Do it." He nodded. "Before I proceed, I need to know one thing. Are you afraid they'll retaliate? Intimidate you? Try to force entry again?" "No," I said. "I'm past fear. What I want now is clarity." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that slow, lawyerly scrutiny that measures character more than words. "You've been patient a long time, haven't you?" he asked. "Too long. You don't strike me as someone who enjoys conflict." "I don't," I said softly. "But I've learned that avoiding conflict only teaches people to take bigger bites." He nodded. "That's true." He printed the first set of documents and placed them before me. "There's one more step," he said. "You should file a police report, not to prosecute, but to document the incident officially. It strengthens the injunction and disarms any story they might try to invent." "I understand." When I signed the papers, the pen moved easily. No trembling, no hesitation. The signature looked like mine again, not the faded version of myself I'd been shrinking into these last years. When everything was organized, Mr. Elridge walked me to the door. "We'll serve them tomorrow morning," he said. They'll be given notice to vacate immediately. If they refuse, the court will take over. I paused at the threshold. Do you think they'll fight it? He shook his head gently. People who think they're untouchable always fight, but they rarely win. Outside, the winter afternoon felt colder, but lighter, as if the air itself had shifted. For the first time since last night, I felt something unfamiliar but welcome settling inside my chest. Not triumph, not vengeance, just certainty. They had pushed me out of my own home. Now the law would open the door for me and close it behind them. I didn't go home after leaving the attorney's office. I wasn't ready to sit alone with my thoughts just yet, not when they felt like loose wires sparking under my ribs. Instead, I walked, slowly, carefully, through the park across from the courthouse. The bare trees rattled like old bones, and the wind carried the faint smell of pine mulch and cigarettes. By the time I returned to the building, the sun was low, stretched thin across the courtyard. The air held that late afternoon heaviness when day refuses to admit its ending. I could see silhouettes moving behind tenant windows, cooking, sweeping, living. My building was alive, even when I wasn't. I'd barely stepped through the side gate when I heard footsteps hurrying behind me. Mom! I stopped. Not because I wanted to, but because my body did it before my mind could intervene. Harold was crossing the courtyard, out of breath, as if the very air had betrayed him. His coat hung crooked, and his hair, usually so neatly combed, was a mess. Mom, he said again, softer now. Can we talk? I turned just enough to face him. I didn't invite him closer. He swallowed hard. Melanie said you locked us out. I didn't lock you out, I replied. I secured my own property. He flinched, not visibly, but enough that I saw it. Mom, please, he tried again, running a hand through his hair. This is all some huge misunderstanding. I don't know what you think happened last night. I know exactly what happened, I said quietly. I was there. His eyes darted away. Shame can be sharp, but only when a conscience still exists beneath it. Melanie gets emotional, he said. She didn't mean what she said. She meant every word, I corrected. She said I should die in a shelter. She threw my things in the trash. She changed my locks while you stood by and did nothing. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His throat moved in a tight swallow. I didn't know she changed the locks, he said finally. She told me you agreed to move into assisted living. I looked at him. Really looked at him. A 50-year-old man, standing in front of his childhood home, still believing lies because they kept him comfortable. Because believing the truth would require a spine he hadn't used in years. You believed that? I asked softly. He looked away again. Yes, he whispered. I did. The wind picked up, sweeping between us, cold and bitter. He stepped closer, hesitant. Mom, we can fix this. Just tell Dwight to restore the old codes. Let's sit down with Melanie. She didn't mean to. She did, I said. And you let her. He blinked, stunned. I didn't. You did, I repeated, still soft, still steady. By saying nothing. By hiding behind your own discomfort. Silence is permission, Harold. Something in his face crumpled, though he fought to hold it together. Mom, we're family, he said, voice cracking. I don't want to lose you. I believed him. That was the worst part. He didn't want to lose me. He just didn't want to stand up for me either. You already lost me, I said. Not today, Not because of Melanie. Years ago, when you stopped coming for dinner, when you only called about the mortgage, when every conversation was about what I could give rather than how I was living. I was busy, he murmured. We are all busy, I said. But love makes room, and neglect fills it. He covered his face with his hands. I watched his shoulders rise, fall, rise again, like a man drowning in his own choices. Mom, please, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. You did. His hands dropped, revealing eyes red with something he didn't want to show. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe realization. He took one final step toward me. Can I come inside, just to talk? I shook my head. No, not today. His breath caught. Then when? When I feel safe again, I said. When you remember whose side a son is meant to be on. He looked at me then as if seeing me for the first time. Not as the woman who paid his bills, not as the fallback, not as the silent safety net, but as a person who could walk away. I'm sorry, he whispered. I nodded. I know, but apologies don't change patterns. Actions do. He stood there a long moment, hands in his pockets, head bowed. A boy again. A man failing at being one. Finally, he turned and walked back across the courtyard. Slow, defeated, quiet. I pressed my fingers to the cold railing, grounding myself. The day had taken something from him, but it had returned something to me, and I wasn't about to lose it again. Melanie showed up just after dusk. I was sitting on the bench near the side entrance, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea Jessie had brought me earlier. The air had settled into that stillness that only comes right before nightfall, when the cold deepens and sound carries farther than it should. The side gate creaked open. Melanie stepped through it like a storm in heels. Her coat was open despite the cold, her lipstick too bright for the failing light, her eyes sharp and restless. She spotted me instantly and marched toward me with purpose. Purpose always looked dangerous on her. There you are, she said. We need to talk. I didn't stand. I didn't shift. I just looked at her, the steam from my tea rising between us like a small shield. She planted herself in front of me, arms crossed. I don't know what kind of performance you're putting on, but it has to stop. Now. I took a slow sip. It isn't a performance. It is, she snapped. You're making Harold miserable. Absolutely miserable. He's been crying. Do you know how humiliating it is to see a grown man cry because his mother is acting like... Like what? I asked softly. She froze for half a second, thrown by the firmness in my voice. Then she recovered. Like someone who has lost grip on reality. Ah, there it was, the old weapon. Melanie, I said, you know exactly what you did. She laughed, sharp and brittle. What I did? I cleaned out a room we thought you didn't need anymore. I tried to help you move into a safe place before you hurt yourself. Frankly, we've been worried about you for a long time. The forgetfulness, the confusion. I'm not confused, I said. Well, she said, tilting her head, the courts won't know that. A chill ran across my shoulders, not fear, just recognition. She'd moved from manipulation to intimidation, her specialty. You changed my locks, I said. You threw my things away. You told me to die in a shelter. She rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, I didn't mean it literally. People say things when they're frustrated. You're choosing to twist it. No, I said. I heard it clearly. She leaned in, too close, too harsh. You're making a mess, Margaret, a big, unnecessary mess. All you had to do was step aside gracefully and let us take responsibility for the building. You're old. You shouldn't be dealing with tenants and maintenance and legal paperwork. But you should? I asked. Her jaw clenched. I would have done a better job than you. That's not what this is about, I said. She blinked. Then what is it about? You wanted ownership. She didn't deny it, not even for a second. Instead, she straightened her spine like someone preparing to pounce. You don't understand how the world works anymore, she said. This property is wasted on you. It needs someone who thinks entitlement is a skill, I interrupted. Her nostrils flared. For a moment, she looked young, not 34, but 14, a girl who'd been praised too often and corrected too little. You don't scare me, she said. I'm not trying to, I replied. I'm warning you. About what? That I've spoken to my attorney and that the paperwork is coming. She blinked, then laughed, but it wasn't confident. It was sharp and high and thin. You're bluffing. You know I'm not. She stepped back, folding her arms again. Her voice changed. Harder now, shaking with fury beneath the surface. You really think anyone is going to take your side? You're nearly 80. You forget things. You lost your purse twice last month. You couldn't figure out how to answer the new intercom. What are you going to tell the police? That your son's wife hurt your feelings? I looked up at her, letting the silence sit long enough for discomfort to settle into her shoes. When the police come, I said, I will tell them exactly what happened. And I'll have documentation. Witnesses. Locks changed without consent. Personal property discarded. Harassment. I paused. What will you tell them? A flicker, a single crack, crossed her expression. She hadn't thought that far ahead. Harold won't support this, she said weakly. He already has, I told her, by saying nothing. The words struck her harder than I expected. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear her eyes of something. Then her voice dropped low, almost a whisper. You're doing this to punish him. No, I said. I'm doing this to protect myself. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned sharply on her heel and stormed toward the gate, shoulders rigid, footsteps too fast. When she reached the gate, she slammed it behind her so hard the metal rang through the courtyard. I sat there quietly, the steam from my tea long gone, the cup cooling in my hands. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Deeply, deeply tired. But underneath that exhaustion, steady and undeniable, was something else. Resolve. And the faintest thrum of something I hadn't felt in years. Self-respect returning. News travels fast in old buildings. Faster, sometimes, than truth. By the next morning, something had shifted in the air. Not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. The building felt different. Like a long-held breath had finally been released. I stepped outside just before 9, intending to check the mail, when I heard 2 tenants whispering in the hallway near the stairwell. They fell silent the moment they saw me. Not out of rudeness, out of respect, out of caution. People know when a line has been crossed, even if they don't know the details. Morning, Mrs. Harlow, one said softly. Good morning, I replied, and kept walking. I didn't ask what they'd been saying. I didn't need to. The looks on their faces, the tightness in their voices, it told me enough. Tenants remember who fixes their boiler at 2 a.m., who negotiates rent when someone loses a job, who brings soup when they're sick. They may not say it aloud, but they notice when someone is mistreated. And my son, not to mention his wife, had misjudged how visible their cruelty had been. I reached the lobby just as the door swung open from the outside. Harold stepped in. He looked smaller, not physically, but in spirit. His shoulders slumped inward, his coat unbuttoned, his tie gone completely. He carried himself like someone trying to make himself invisible. "Mom," he said quietly. I nodded. "Harold." He approached, but not too close, as if he were afraid I might step back. I didn't move at all. I I went to work this morning," he said, "and it felt strange." "How so?" He swallowed hard. "People treated me differently. That, I thought, was inevitable." He continued, staring at the floor. "I think one of the tenants works with me. Or maybe her cousin does. Or maybe someone just saw Melanie yelling in the courtyard yesterday. I don't know. But," he hesitated, "people know something happened." I didn't answer. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he used to make when he was 10 years old and had broken a lamp he'd tried to blame on the cat. "They're looking at me like I'm a bad son," he whispered. I met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "That must be difficult." He winced. "You're not going to help me out here, are you?" "You've had years of my help, Harold," I said softly. "You didn't want it yesterday." He exhaled shakily. "Mom, I didn't mean for any of this to spiral. We thought you needed help. Guidance." "Guidance," I repeated. "By force?" He looked away again. "I didn't know she changed the locks. She made it sound like you'd agreed to leave. She told me you'd been confused, misplacing things, forgetting appointments." "Did I tell you that?" I asked. "No," he said. "She did." "And you believed her?" His answer came too slow. "Yes." Silence settled between us like dust. "She said the tenants were complaining about you," he added weakly. "That you'd mixed up 2 of the rent reports. That you forgot where the fire extinguisher was." I felt a faint ache in my chest. Not panic, not fear. Just something old and tired. "She exaggerated," I said. He nodded, but shame had already risen in his eyes. "I know that now." Just then, the door behind him opened again, and Mrs. Klein from 2B stepped inside, carrying her grocery bag. She glanced at us briefly, gave me a warm nod, then looked away from Harold pointedly. He felt it. His shoulders tensed. "See?" he whispered. "No one will even look at me." "They're processing," I said. "They saw some things, heard some things." "It will take time." He swallowed, voice cracking. "Mom, I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I answered. "But you did." His breath hitched, and for a moment I saw my little boy behind the man, confused, lost, scared of consequences for the first time in his adult life. "Melanie says you're trying to destroy us," he whispered. "I'm trying to protect myself," I replied. "What happens to you 2 is up to you." He shook his head. "She thinks you're retaliating." "No," I said. "I'm defending what's mine. That's not retaliation. That's survival." He took another step closer, desperation tightening his features. "Mom, please, give us one more chance. Don't file anything." "I already have," I said softly. "It's in motion now. You'll receive notice soon." The color drained from his face. His hand lifted slightly, as if he wanted to reach for me, but he let it fall. "Mom," he whispered, "if she loses this apartment, if we lose this building, we have nowhere to go." I looked at him, really looked, and finally said the truth neither of us had faced. "You had a home," I said. "You chose to throw me out of it." He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he wasn't the man he pretended to be. He was the man he'd allowed himself to become. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry." I nodded once. I believe you, but apologies don't erase consequences. He stood there, trembling, then turned and walked back out into the cold. Not angrily, not defiantly, just defeated. For the first time in years, the building felt like it stood with me, not around me, and I could finally breathe again. The police didn't come with sirens. They never do in situations like this. They arrived the way winter arrives, quietly, unmistakably, without needing to announce itself. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock on the lobby door, firm, measured, not the frantic pounding of anger, nor the timid tapping of someone uncertain. This was official, controlled. I was sitting in the small lobby chair near the mailboxes, reviewing a handwritten list of repairs I'd delayed over the past year. The moment I looked up, I saw two officers through the glass, a man in his 40s, calm eyes, worn jacket, and a younger woman, alert, observing everything. The older officer spotted me and nodded slightly. "Mrs. Harlow?" "Yes." They stepped inside, letting the cold draft swirl briefly around their boots before the door closed again. "I'm Officer Rivas, and this is Officer Patel. We received a call regarding a disturbance involving your daughter-in-law." I didn't stiffen. I didn't flinch. Of course she had called them. Melanie believed every problem could be solved with volume, bravado, or someone in uniform leaning in her favor. But police don't respond to indignation. They respond to reports, to facts, to patterns. And I had documented everything. Officer Patel pulled out a notepad. "We also have your report from yesterday, ma'am. Forced entry attempt, verbal harassment, property interference. We're following up." I nodded. "Thank you." Just then, the side gate banged open. Melanie barreled into the courtyard, coat flapping, face flushed, phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. She froze when she saw the police standing with me. Her voice rose instantly. "Oh, thank God you're here! Arrest her!" The officers didn't move. Rivas said gently, "Ma'am, we're here to speak with both parties." "She locked me out of my own home," Melanie snapped, pointing at me as though I were a stray dog on the loose. "She changed the codes, barred the doors, and now she's telling everyone I threatened her." "I didn't say threatened," I said quietly. "I said harassed." Melanie's eyes widened with incredulous outrage. "This is insane. She's old. She's confused. You can't trust anything she says." Officer Patel tilted her head slightly. "We're here to determine what happened, ma'am." Melanie turned to them dramatically. "Here's what happened. She's trying to steal the apartment from us. She's unstable. She shouldn't even be living alone. She forgets things. She can't manage a building. Officer Rivas raised a hand. "Mrs. Melanie Harlow," she hissed. "Mrs. Harlow, the title records show the building belongs solely to Mrs. Margaret Harlow." Melanie froze. It was like watching someone step confidently onto a stair that isn't there. "That's impossible," she breathed. "No, ma'am," Officer Patel said. "It's not. We checked on our way here." Melanie didn't look at me. She couldn't. She kept staring at the officers as though they had personally betrayed her. "Your mother-in-law," Patel continued, "is the legal owner of all 14 units, including the one you currently occupy." The words hit Melanie with the weight of something she'd never expected. Reality. She rallied quickly. Rage always gave her balance. "We live there. You can't just throw us out." "No one is throwing you out today," Officer Rivas said. "But you cannot change locks on a residence that does not belong to you. And you cannot remove someone's property without their permission." "That's not what happened," Melanie insisted. Patel looked at me. Do you have documentation? I handed her the folder my attorney insisted I keep on me until the eviction was processed. She opened it. Photographs of my belongings discarded in the trash chute. The locksmith invoice Melanie had left on the counter before she knew she'd be caught. Dwight's signed statement documenting unauthorized access. Evidence. Real, mundane, undeniable. Patel's eyes hardened. Thank you, ma'am. This is sufficient. Melanie realized she was losing ground, losing control. Losing the story she thought she could reshape with enough volume. You're taking her side? She shouted. She's lying. She's making this all up because she hates me. Officer Rivas stepped forward, voice calm but firm. Mrs. Harlow, we are not here to take sides. We are here to tell you that you cannot enter the unit without the owner's consent. And after reviewing the evidence, we are placing a temporary no-contact recommendation between you and Mrs. Margaret Harlow. You will need to maintain distance until this matter is resolved legally. Melanie went pale, then flushed red, then pale again. What does that mean? She whispered. It means, said Patel gently, that until the court hearing, you must not approach her, speak to her, or attempt to access her property. If you violate this, it becomes a criminal matter. For once, Melanie was speechless. I remained seated, quiet, not triumphant, just steady. Rivas turned to me. If she approaches you again, ma'am, you call us immediately. Understood? Yes, I said softly. Melanie's voice finally returned, a rasp, not a roar. You're ruining us, she whispered. I met her eyes. No. I'm finally protecting myself. The officers escorted her a few steps toward the gate, giving her space to collect whatever was left of her dignity. She didn't look back. And for the first time in years, I felt the building exhale around me. The building felt strangely quiet that night. Not empty. Just quiet in the way a home becomes when the chaos has finally stepped outside and closed the door behind it. I walked slowly down the hallway toward my unit, touching the railing with my fingertips, grounding myself in the familiar ridges of old paint and worn metal. For the first time since they changed my locks, I reached toward my door. I didn't open it. Not yet. The new code wouldn't activate until midnight, and even if it had, I wasn't sure I was ready to walk back into a space where someone had tried to erase me. Pain stays in the walls. You can't always see it, but you feel where it settled. Instead, I sat down on the floor by the door, gently lowering myself so my knees wouldn't protest too loudly. The carpet was thin, a little rough, but warm from the building's heating. I rested my back against the wall and folded my hands in my lap. The hallway was dim, the overhead lights soft and humming with electricity. A comforting sound. Old buildings always hum. New buildings pretend they don't. Across the hall, someone's radio played an old song. Something slow from the 70s. Piano. Soft vocals. It wasn't sentimental, but it felt like something to lean into, like having a hand placed lightly on your shoulder. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not to remember, not to escape, just to breathe. People assume that anger is what keeps an old woman awake at night. But it's not anger. It's the 1,000 tiny shocks of realizing how long you've tolerated being overlooked. I didn't let myself fall into the past, but my mind walked around the edges of it, careful not to slip. I thought about groceries carried up these stairs for 40 years. I thought about winter leaks I patched myself until I could afford a plumber. I thought about how many times Harold had run down this hallway with his shoelaces untied, laughing so loudly the entire floor heard him. And then I thought about yesterday, about the silence behind the door when I called his name. That silence hurt more than anything Melanie said. Footsteps approached softly. I opened my eyes. It was Mrs. Klein from 2B, holding a folded blanket. "I wasn't sure if you had one with you," she said in a whisper. "The floor gets cold." She didn't linger. She didn't lecture. She simply placed the blanket beside me and walked back to her apartment. A small gesture, but it steadied me more than she could ever know. I draped it over my lap. The weight settled against my legs like reassurance. The minutes passed slowly. People came and went. Jessie tiptoeing down with a laundry basket, Lyle stomping by with a toolkit, a toddler crying 2 floors up, someone laughing on a phone call behind a closed door. Life happening, ordinary and unbroken. Around 10, the building grew quieter again. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the windows. The radiator clicked beside me, then sighed, a familiar rhythm. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded sweater. My husband's sweater. Dark wool, stretched at the elbows. Faint smell of cedar if you pressed your nose against it long enough. Not a memory. Just an object that had stayed with me longer than most people. I rested it on my knees and smoothed the fabric with slow, deliberate strokes. The kind you make not out of sentiment, but out of habit, out of respect, out of understanding that some things, some quiet, unremarkable things, carry more strength than they look like they should. I didn't cry. Not because I refused to, simply because I didn't need to. Sadness had already done its work. Now it was time for something else. A steadiness, a clarity, a return to myself. Just before midnight, the hallway lights flickered once, an electrical quirk I'd never gotten around to fixing. The panel in the basement always needed rewiring. I would call the electrician tomorrow. Then my phone buzzed softly. A message from Dwight. Code updated. You now have exclusive access to Unit 1B. I placed my hand gently on the door. The wood felt familiar, solid, mine. I didn't open it. Not tonight. I simply stayed there a little longer, breathing in the quiet, letting the day settle around me like dust, finally coming to rest. Tomorrow, I would step inside. Tomorrow, I would reclaim the space they tried to erase me from. Tonight, I allowed myself one small truth. I had survived worse. And I was still here. The eviction notice was served at 8:14 in the morning. Not with shouting, not with drama, not even with raised voices. Just a quiet knock, the rustle of paper, and the steady professionalism of people who deal in facts, not arguments. I was standing at the end of the hallway when Dwight and a court officer approached Unit 1B's door, the door Melanie had once treated as hers. She wasn't there. Neither was Harold. They were upstairs, in the unit they'd taken over as though it were already theirs. The officer knocked firmly. Harold Harlow? Melanie Harlow? Court notice. There was a pause. Footsteps. Whispering. The kind of whispering that happens when panic hits a wall. Then the door opened. Harold looked older than he had 2 days ago. Pale, hollow around the eyes, shoulders curled inward, like a man bracing for a blow he knew he'd earned. Melanie stood behind him, makeup perfect, but eyes wild, scanning for a weakness to exploit. The officer held out the envelope. "This is formal notice," he said. "You are required to vacate this property immediately. You have 24 hours to remove personal belongings. Failure to comply will escalate to a forced removal. These terms are non-negotiable. Melanie laughed once, sharp and brittle. This is ridiculous. We're family. Officer Rivas, who had accompanied the court officer, answered with quiet authority. Family relations are irrelevant in property disputes, ma'am. Ownership dictates occupancy. It is ours, she insisted. Harold's mother she's confused. Dwight stepped forward, voice steady as bedrock. All units are registered to Mrs. Margaret Harlow, sole owner. This notice is fully lawful. Her gaze snapped to me at the end of the hallway. There was hate in it now, not fresh, but layered, as if it had been simmering long before any of this began. You did this, she whispered. No, I said softly. You did. Harold finally stepped out into the hallway, rubbing his temples as though trying to hold his head together. Mom, please, he said. We don't have anywhere to go. There was a time those words would have shattered me. A time when I would have reached for my checkbook, my keys, my heart, anything to fix his life before he even asked. But that time was over. You have options, I said. You've always had options. You're choosing to see only the ones that depend on me. He looked down, shame trembling in his hands. Melanie pushed past him, her voice rising, sharp edges, punctured pride. You think you're winning? She spat. You think kicking us out makes you powerful? It makes you cruel. A cruel old woman clinging to a building she can't even run anymore. I didn't answer her anger. I answered her truth. This building is my life's work, I said. It housed my family. It fed us. It protected us. And when I get old, I am not punished for surviving long enough to still own it. She stared at me, speechless for the first time since I'd known her. Dwight cleared his throat. Officers, shall we proceed upstairs? They nodded. Harold watched them head toward the unit he had claimed without rights. His breathing grew shallow. They're really going to kick us out, he said, the realization breaking through his denial. Yes, I said, because you left me no choice. He swallowed. I didn't want any of this to happen. Neither did I. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I simply stood the way women my age stand when the world expects them to crumble. He reached for my arm out of habit, seeking comfort or forgiveness or something he hadn't earned. I stepped back, gently but firmly. Not now, I said. His hand froze midair, then dropped. Behind him, Melanie was pacing, shaking her head in disbelief, muttering under her breath about lawyers and mistakes and old women who needed to be put somewhere. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. The law had spoken. The building had spoken. And for the first time in years, I had spoken too. The officers returned briefly, confirming the notice had been delivered upstairs as well. 24 hours. That was all the time left for them in this building. Harold looked at me one more time, desperation and regret tangled in his expression. Mom, can we fix this? Maybe, I said, but not by living under the same roof. He nodded slowly, defeated. Melanie stormed into the stairwell, slamming the door so hard it shook the railing. I stood still, breathing, letting the quiet settle into my bones. This wasn't victory. This wasn't revenge. This was closure. Cold, precise, and necessary. And as the last echo of the slammed door faded, I felt something inside me that I thought I'd lost years ago. The quiet, steady pulse of my own life returning. I didn't follow the officers upstairs. There was no reason to. The process was already in motion, and I had no interest in watching the last pieces of a broken situation fall apart in real time. Instead, I walked back toward the courtyard, slower than usual, letting the cold air settle around me like a shawl I didn't choose but accepted. It was nearly noon when the side door opened again. Harold stepped out first. He didn't look like a man being evicted. He looked like a man who'd finally come face to face with himself. His shoulders stooped, his gaze unfixed, as if the world around him had suddenly become unfamiliar and too bright. Melanie followed several steps behind, pacing circles around her own frustration. She was muttering into her phone, gesturing sharply, trying to find a lawyer who would tell her this wasn't happening. No one would. When Harold saw me, he slowed, then stopped. He didn't approach right away, almost as though he needed permission. I didn't give it. But I didn't walk away either. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I nodded once. He approached, but not too close. His breath came out in white wisps, drifting between us like unspoken history. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried a different sentence. "I didn't know this would go this far." "It didn't go this far today," I said softly. "It went this far years ago. You're only seeing it now." He flinched, but he didn't deny it. "I should have stopped her," he whispered. "Yes. I should have told her no. Yes. I should have protected you." I let the silence sit. He needed to hear it echo. When he finally met my eyes, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, the one who cried when he broke my teacup and tried to glue it back together with paste. But I also saw the man he'd become, someone who had let love soften into selfishness, then into neglect. "Mom, I can't undo what happened," he said. "But can I make it right?" "You can start," I said. "But making it right will take longer than today." He nodded, shoulders shaking. "I know." Behind him, Melanie stomped down the steps, phone pressed to her ear. "She says the eviction is legal," she barked angrily into the receiver. "Yes, legal. No, she didn't transfer anything to us. No, there's no co-ownership. Yes, I understand I can't change the locks again." "Yes, I know how old she is. That's not the point. Just find me someone willing to fight." She hung up with a frustrated noise and marched toward us. "This is ridiculous," she snapped at Harold. "Are you really just going to stand here and take this? She's throwing us out." Harold didn't look at her. He kept his gaze on me. "She didn't throw us out," he said quietly. "We did this to ourselves." Melanie's mouth fell open. I don't think she had ever heard him disagree with her publicly. Not once. "That's not true," she hissed. "You're just letting her manipulate you." "She's not manipulating me," he said. "She's finally telling the truth." Melanie stepped back as if he had struck her. For a moment, the courtyard held a tension so thin and sharp it might have snapped if anyone breathed too loudly. Then Melanie turned to me, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with outrage bruised by humiliation. "You think you've won? You haven't. You're alone in this building, alone in that little apartment, alone in your old age. What do you have without us?" I looked at her evenly. "Peace." She swallowed hard, color rising in her cheeks. "That's pathetic," she spat. "No," I said. "It's freedom." Her face twisted. Anger, disbelief, something almost like grief. And she stormed past Harold, slamming into the stairwell so violently the door rattled. Harold watched her go. Then he spoke without turning back to me. "I don't know what's going to happen with us," he said quietly. I don't know who she'll be after this, but I know who I should have been. I let him speak. Sometimes people need the space to finally hear themselves. I want to come back someday, he said. Not to live here, just to come back. You can, I said, but not now. His eyes filled with something raw, something that finally resembled accountability. I'll earn it, he whispered. I nodded. That's all you ever needed to do. He exhaled shakily, then turned and walked toward the stairs, following Melanie but not chasing her. For the first time in years, he walked like a man carrying the weight of his own choices instead of mine. When the door closed behind him, I stood alone in the courtyard. The air was cold, but it didn't feel hostile. It felt honest. Sometimes endings don't roar. Sometimes they just settle. And in that settling, something inside me lifted. Not triumph, not revenge, but dignity. Reshaped. Tomorrow, they would be gone. And I, for the first time in a long while, would begin again. They left before sunrise. No slamming doors this time, no shouting, no last attempts to twist the story in their favor. Just the soft, shuffling sounds of boxes being carried down the stairwell and the low murmur of a tired argument that had run out of sharp edges. I didn't watch from the window. I didn't need to. Some departures are better heard than seen. When the final thud of the trunk closing echoed through the courtyard, the building grew still. Not empty. Just still in a way that felt like a long exhale after a fever breaks. I waited a full minute before opening my door. For the first time in days, the hallway smelled like itself. Dust, radiator heat, a faint trace of someone's morning toast. I stepped out slowly, leaning one hand against the doorframe, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to feel the wood under my fingertips. My door. My home. The lock clicked softly behind me. A small sound, but it settled deep in my chest. I walked toward the lobby, each step quiet, measured. Tenants peeked out of half-open doors. Curiosity, relief, a few gentle nods. No one intruded. They simply acknowledged me the way people acknowledge someone who has survived something heavy. Jessie appeared at the bottom of the stairs holding a paper bag. Mrs. H., she said, cheeks pink. I made muffins. Fresh ones this time. I smiled. Thank you, dear. She handed them to me carefully, as if they were something fragile. I saved the corner piece. It's the best one. Kindness, I've learned, is rarely loud. It lives in small places. Outside, the morning light spilled across the courtyard. The thin, pale light of winter. The kind that doesn't warm you, but reminds you that warmth exists somewhere. I stepped through the side door and breathed in the cold air until my lungs ached a little. The moving truck was pulling away. Harold sat in the passenger seat, head bowed. He didn't see me. Maybe that was for the best. Some goodbyes don't need witnesses. I stood there until the truck disappeared down the street. Not mourning, not celebrating, simply acknowledging the truth of it. They were gone. And I remained. I walked slowly around the courtyard, touching the railing, checking the gate latch, feeling the familiar grooves in the brick. Nothing extraordinary, but everything mine. This building had never been perfect, but it had been loyal, and I intended to be loyal in return. When I reached my door again, I paused with my hand on the knob. People assume that strength feels like fire. It doesn't. Sometimes it feels like quiet, like a room that finally holds only your own breath, like a key that fits the lock because it always has. Inside, my apartment looked smaller than I remembered. but warmer too. Sunlight slanted across the floorboards. My husband's sweater lay folded exactly where I'd left it. Not a victory, just a life reclaimed. I set the muffins on the counter, filled the kettle, and waited for the water to boil. The whistle rose slowly, steady and familiar. I poured the tea into my favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim I never replaced, because it reminded me that imperfect things can still be useful, still be loved. I sat in my old armchair, wrapped the blanket around my legs, and let the quiet settle. For the first time in many years, I felt intact. No pieces missing, no weight pulling me inward. Just me. Still here, still capable of beginning again. If there's anything I've learned at 79, it's this. Dignity isn't something people give you. It's something you return to yourself when the world tries to take it. And once it returns, it doesn't leave easily. So if you're reading this and life has pushed you into a corner you didn't deserve, don't let that be the last place you stand. Not at our age. Not after everything we've survived. Find your voice again. Find your ground again. And if this story meant something to you, stay a while. Leave a comment. Share your own. We women don't get heard nearly enough.